So, Ep.1, Performance and Protocols. I'm here with Chris Wojcik. Is that right, Chris? I
Yes,
forgot the
that's correct.
pronunciation right.
That's correct.
Chris is a world-renowned black belt. He's only after coming off a win against Owen O'Flanagan, who's also a great leg locker. And the reason I invited Chris on is because he's got an X account as well, and he writes. And I actually seen on Flow one of his articles, and I thought, do you know what? I'll send him a message and see what he thinks about coming on. And thanks very much, Chris, for coming on. And if you want to say a few things as well.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me. I've been following your. How long have we followed each other on Twitter now? Like,
A couple of months.
yeah, a few months, but you always do really good content about like kind of like health and fitness and stuff like that. And I think it's really interesting.
Uh,
I didn't know that you trained jujitsu before I saw your like post back in the day. And then, clicked on the profile. And so it's
I
cool to finally
I
connect.
was doing I done the IBJJF Europeans, a blue belt adult there recently.
Mm,
So I done well, won my first by a triangle, and then second match I got the number three seed, and I lost on points. So hopefully I'm not where you're at yet, but hopefully in the future. I wanted to ask you a few things as well. So, uh, like obviously, the podcast is called Performance and Protocols. What's your everyday protocol? It doesn't need to be health and fitness. It can be just general with writing and everything else that you do daily.
mhm. Yeah, so I generally wake up. Today we woke up at 7:30. Normally I wake up between 7:30 and 9, because I do jujitsu for a living, so I don't have to like be up at any time, which is nice. So generally
Yeah.
wake up. I don't wake up like strict. Like I try not to use an alarm clock if I can. Although sometimes we have places to be, but generally wake up between 7:30 and 9, and I train at noon. So I write normally from anytime between like 8:30, like after waking up, about probably within 30 minutes, I start writing. And I write until about 11:30. And then
Mhm.
I generally try to watch some jujitsu before I go into noon training. So I'm going in with a plan or like some stuff that I'm working on. So I have I try to avoid just showing up to training. Similarly, when I write, I try to write like outlines for all my pieces before I actually write the piece itself. So everything that I do is very. I try to make it very structured. I find that when it's not structured, it becomes like I'm kind of winging it, and the quality significantly decreases. And in order to bring the quality back up, I have to do a lot of extra work in post. So to avoid that, I try to show up to writing with a plan, and I show up to training with a plan. And then I get done with training about 2, and then I lift weights around. Usually we lift weights around 5 o'clock, and then I teach the night class here at the gym on Wednesday and Thursday. So after lifting so not lifting today, I lift 3 days a week usually. So usually it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday. This week, since I was traveling and kind of jet lagged on Monday, it's going to be Tuesday, Thursday, probably Friday. But I generally lift, and then I go back to the gym Wednesday and Thursday, teach the night class, and then uh, come home, have dinner, relax a little bit, go to bed, do it all again the next day. So that's kind of like a day in the life. Is that kind of
Well, that's interesting. I read even one of your articles you were saying about you read Cal Newport Deep Work as well too, and I
yeah?
thought that was interesting. But like what you were saying about in the article about, on Flow, what you were saying is some people having the balance. Like some people have a job outside of jiu-jitsu. Me, for example, I don't do jiu-jitsu full time. Obviously, I do this as well and do health coaching for people. So I'm always as the same as you said. It's like you're trying to find that balance, and you're like, right, how do I balance being full time and maybe doing like something else on the side? Because like for most people, you can't make money out of jiu-jitsu unless you're the elite level of the sport. And the only way to fuel that really is like there's a guy where I'm from called Gianluca Maltese, and he's I don't know if you know who he is. He's a black belt as well, but he actually has a job in IT, I believe, as well on top of being an elite level black belt. And for most people aren't going to do elite level jiu-jitsu. Like what about the guy that's got two or three kids? Like he needs to find a structure, and most people want to get good, but they don't have that same structure. They just come in and they feel like it's a bit like writing. they come in, they feel like they're just going to come in with no structure and they're going to get better. But realistically, there's people in jobs for 20 plus years who are incompetent purely because they come in with that mentality. I'm just going to come on the next day. I'm just going to come on the next day. In reality, they need structure and like training with intent. And do you feel like that's a positive that everyone should go on with?
So I think that I try to avoid like general statements for everybody, but I think that for most people, whether so it depends on like what we're looking at to improve. It's like most people are either trying to improve their time on the mat. So it's like, okay, this is my life. I can't get more time on the mat. So then I need to improve what I'm doing while I'm on the mat and I need to structure that better. Other
Mm-hmm.
people have a time management issue and they could get more time on the mat if they structured the rest of their time better. So those are kind
Mm-hmm.
of the two camps. Like, for me, it's like I could probably get, like, I could probably structure like my training time a little bit better to get a little bit more out of it. Versus like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I could like physically. So like I train 6 hard sessions a week plus lifting weights plus occasionally some drilling and movement at night. So I'm doing like 11. I'm on the mat like 11 to 12 to 15 times a week. Because if I'm
Yeah.
doing private lessons or doing seminars or doing extra stuff like that, it's so I don't think I could physically be on the mat for more time without like I would have to give up writing or I would have to like not hang out with my girlfriend, or I would have to like stop cooking my own food. I would have to like sacrifice like things that I don't really want to sacrifice. And so for
Yeah.
me, I need to be more intentional with what I'm doing when I'm on the mat.
You
So
don't want to take the Mikey Musumeci approach where you're training 12 hours on the mats, 12 hours a day.
I do not. I do not. And I don't think that, I think that like, guys like Mikey, and I remember reading like Gordon Ryan's daily routine when I was like a blue belt, and it was like a
Mhm.
14-hour day every day. And obviously, he's using a ton of steroids to fuel this like day, and also like, he's not living a life that I would want to live. So for me,
No.
it's like I would think about like who is doing like I try to look at like people who are doing kind of what I want to be doing, and I try to like learn from them, if that makes sense. And so then
Yeah.
like for me, I was always training with like hobbyists who were like really good, and I was like, okay, well, I'm
Yeah.
better than most of these people, so I'm going to take something from their approach, which is this like balance, and then I'm going to try to do just like a little bit more work and train a little bit smarter, and that sort of kind of led me down this path.
Yeah. That's interesting what you say because, like, I wouldn't trade my place for Gordon Ryan's place no matter what, purely from the reason is like, not in a bad way, but I don't feel like Gordon Ryan's going to live past 40, like the way he's going. And like for him, that's the sacrifice he wanted to make to be the best of all time. Like there's no doubt Gordon Ryan is the best of all time in Jiu Jitsu. His titles speak for itself. But as you say, you're like, you don't want to have that approach. And the thing is, a lot of people as well aren't, they say one thing, but they do another. And like they're only telling you a piece of the puzzle realistically. And I feel like not to denigrate instructionals, but like instructionals are also only a piece of the puzzle. I feel like you can only develop your jiu-jitsu like from feel as like more time that you do. And like instructionals are one part of that puzzle, but the more you need mat time realistically. And I feel like a lot of people focus too much on doing a lot of instructionals instead of actually doing the jiu-jitsu, and then they're too much on the theory and not the actual practice or like more competition, more mat time experience. Like I've got over 120 matches competitively in jiu-jitsu now, and I'm only like training 4 years. I just feel like you can sort of get people get skewed away because what they see online, and that's what they believe reality to be, but like they don't train every day, they don't know in the same way that someone like you knows. And I think like people need to say that to people. There's only like maybe Craig, who you train with, that really tells the truth, and that's some like some so funny because he's so abrasive.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that like what you see online is very different from the reality. Like like even Gordon, it's like Gordon, I don't think trains very much anymore because of his health.
No.
You know, he's I was talking to I won't name names, but I was talking to a member of New Wave recently, and another guy was with us who had recently visited New Wave, like within the last 2 years, and they said, "Oh, were you there when Gordon was there?" Like as if Gordon is like not there now training very much, and it's like I just think because of his stomach, because of all the health issues, you know, his knee is messed up. I think he's having knee surgery. It's like the what you see online, like everyone talks about how, especially in this sport, the jujitsu as a sport is like very much like hustle obsessed. You know, like
Yeah.
everyone, no one is gonna say, "Oh, I don't work as hard as them" or whatever. No one wants to seem like they're not working as hard as their opponent because it's seen as like
Yeah.
a sign of weakness. And so, like for me, it's like I'm more interested in like jujitsu. Like so, when I think about jujitsu, like at its core, like what is jujitsu? Jujitsu is the ability because jujitsu is like closely related to judo, and judo
Yeah.
translates to the like supple way, like the easy way. So essentially, what judo is trying to submit someone or beat someone with as little effort as possible. And jujitsu
Mhm.
is the pretty much just the more advanced form of like what traditional judo is. So like for me, it's like when we think about this as like a lifestyle, it's like jujitsu. I want to be as good as the best guys without killing myself the same way.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I definitely agree with that
I think this
in your
is
position.
the way that we should like think about training. And obviously there are times when you have to like grind a little bit, you know, like competition. Like for example, when I'm competing, I try to be a little bit I'm more physical than when I'm training. Like but when I'm training, I'm very much like I can train like if I'm healthy, I can train six or I can roll for like an hour and a half a day because my style is not like you know, super like aggressive, not super beating up my body. When I'm competing, it's different because competition is not a sustainable thing. You know, that's like the peak, that's the 1%. But even still, it's like I try to be like, I try to use my mind a little bit to when it comes to one, like my technique, but also to like my approach to training. Like I try to get the most out of what I'm doing instead of trying to do the most.
Yeah. I think like your approach is smart because you might be cognitively demanding of yourself, but at times you're not being physically demanding. Maybe most of the time you're actually training. You're staying in a zone two, like you're sweating a bit and you're thinking more than you're actually doing like really heavy, intense physical training. Because as you say, like I've even noticed this when I first started, obviously as a white belt, you're like you could train less as a white belt than you could as a blue, a purple, and a brown because you start to realize it's not about the physical demand and training. Like anyone can be really physically demanding of their body, but not everybody can think and not everybody can be intelligent about their training itself. And that is so multifaceted and it can apply across the board. Like you can apply that to writing. You can just like you could apply that to like your health. Like there's so many things that you can actually do that it applies to your day on the daily. Like one thing I even thought about as well was like you can try and brute force your way to competency, but like that doesn't always work. And like a lot of people think volume is like the best thing ever. And while volume is good, you need like it's more perfect practice makes perfect and not like just practicing too much to make perfect. Like if that was the case, I always say this is like people wouldn't be in jobs 20 years and still be bad at that job if practice made perfect. It's not always about volume. And like there's people like instances in jiu-jitsu where people have gotten very good in a short period of time. And like if you were to break down the structure of how they got good, it would definitely be because they've put volume on, but it's also like a perfect practice of volume. It's like training with intent, training with they've broke everyone down. Like when I first started jiu-jitsu, I looked at like people at my weight class and I says like Rafa Mendes, what is he doing here? Like how is he training? I would look at his matches, I would break everything down. I'm like, right, if I'm going to structure someone that has a similar body type to me, I'm like, how am I going to train like that? How am I going to like pull into the guard that way, the way they do it, and then find it how it applies to my own body? And I think like you're probably a perfect example of this now, is you've put practicality into jiu-jitsu And like even the next question I'm going to ask you as well is, how did you discover things like this Woj Lock and stuff as well too? And how do you discover new positions? Like I would definitely love to hear about that.
Yeah, so before I talk about the Woj Lock, I think that like one thing that I'd like to add to what you said is like for me, I started like I was way heavy on the volume in the early days of my like career. So like I used to train first thing in the morning, do a weight session at noon. I would teach three classes at night. I would teach kids, then I would teach a private, then I would teach adult class, then I would clean the gym. I would do an extra session in the afternoon if I had a competition coming up. So I was like super heavy on the volume. And what I realized is I was like 23 and my body felt like I was breaking down physically. And like
83.
yeah, I was like 23 going on 83. And I think that for me, I realized that I was like, okay, I can either do a bunch of steroids, which is like very common in jiu-jitsu, and I can do a bunch of
Mhm.
steroids and like use that to keep up this routine, or I can try to find a better way. And I was kind of like, okay, I feel like it would be more valuable for me to try to work to find like a better way to train instead of trying to just like just doing what everybody else is doing. So I kind of was like, I'm going to try to put in some time into finding like a smarter approach. And so I had like a week when I was a brown belt. I I threw out like something in my neck. I popped my
Mhm.
rib and I threw out my back within like 4 days of each other. And I just kept training through it until the back injury, until the rib injury. Because like I don't know if you ever
Mhm.
had a rib injury, but when you hurt your rib, you can't do anything. It's like you're just
Intercostal muscle a couple of months ago I had, and it was actually like my body was killing, and I had to like just medicate myself, but it was the worst ever. I was shooting on the triangle, and the intercostal muscle like overstretched, and I had a strain, and I had to use a load of stuff, and it was terrible. It's probably the
yeah.
worst thing to happen.
It's like so like the other thing about jujitsu is like most injuries you can train around. Like okay, my knee hurts, so I'm
Mhm.
going to train and I'm going to maybe work my guard instead of wrestling, right? I'm going to maybe like work on positional escapes instead of like sparring really hard. So like that's kind of one thing that I think I like about jujitsu is you can work around most things. When you hurt your
Yeah.
rib or you hurt your back, you can't work around it. You gotta chill. And so I had this point where I was like, okay, I like couldn't train through my injuries anymore. And I was still pretty young. I was like 23 when this happened, 24 maybe. And then I was like, okay, I need to change my approach. And so I started changing the way that I was training. And that sort of led me into doing I was like, okay, how are the like guys who are not like trained, like not the physical specimens, how are like the more kind of cerebral guys winning? And most of the time they're winning by like somebody who I had a match with last week, and like Joseph, I'm like, how is Joseph winning a lot? He's winning by
Yeah.
leg locks, he's winning by this like kind of he does this his wrestling is very like low impact. He does a lot of arm drags, he does a lot of ducks, he does a lot of like judo, like inside trips, foot sweeps, stuff like this. So kind of like studying guys who are succeeding in the sport without killing themselves. That was
Mhm.
kind of like my inspiration for the approach that I now start to take. So it's like, how can I do as well as possible with as little effort as possible? And that kind of, changed the way that I'm training. And then that led me into finding the Woj locks. The way that I found the Woj
Yeah.
lock is I did 50-50 rounds every day because I was like, I
Mhm.
couldn't really roll because I was injured or, I just was doing, or even if the injury had healed, I'm trying to think. I've been doing it since brown belt, so it must have been during the period when I was injured, and I couldn't quite finish. Like I was having a hard time finishing heel hooks, and guys were kind of stalling me out in 50-50. And we
Mhm.
would do these rounds every day. So we would do like either 50-50 or saddle or like, I don't know, 411, whatever you guys call it, or
Mhm.
like single leg X or outside Ashi. We would do leg lock positions one day per week. We would do them for the entire session. And then the next day would be like turtle or front headlock or a different position. And so the way that the training was structured was it was very oriented towards building specific skills in positions. So it's kind of like the ecological kind of stuff that is becoming very popular.
That's
But
what we
we
do. as
we
well.
didn't call it that. We were just like, okay,
Mm.
today we're doing leg locks, you know,
Yeah,
and you try to either finish them or get out, and that was kind of the game, right? And so I
yeah,
feel like, and also too, it's like the ecological training has been around in jiu-jitsu forever. But before I go on like a different tangent, essentially what happened was the Woj Lock came as a response to defending the most common submission from
them
50-50.
turning over.
Yeah. So
I
it's like
think, yeah,
it created in my instruction, I called it the Woj lemma. So it's like the dilemma between
yeah,
the Woj Lock and the inside heel hook, and they kind of work together. And so that was kind of how I found it, was from there. And I think that I was also playing with Aoki locks at the time, and I was like, I never tap anyone with foot locks, like straight foot locks from 50-50, because the angle is weird. It's hard to get like a good pressure on the hips.
right, yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, what if we do like a Aoki, like a reverse Aoki? I was like, is that a thing? And then there were some, like Braulio Estima does it too. Like, I'm not gonna say I didn't invent it. I just made it a little bit more popular.
Yeah,
And
everything
so
is just recycled, and everything is just recycled, as you said about jiu-jitsu and judo. It's like jiu-jitsu basically stole judo and then made it on the ground, and then the Gracies then reprinted it and marketed it. And realistically, jiu-jitsu is just
yeah,
judo,
yeah. And
except
then now
ground judo.
we just took the gi off, and we're still doing the same thing. You
Yeah,
know, for
realistically.
but it's just rest, and it's that is like goes back to like the samurai, and then before that, I think it's like the Roman Empire was doing a lot of this like submission fighting,
Greco-Roman.
yeah,
Yeah.
Greco-Roman wrestling and stuff like that. So, but either way, it's like kind of just by spending more time in positions instead of focusing on winning in training. Essentially, that's how you get better at jujitsu. Like, and I think that we do this in other sports. So, like when I was growing up, I played soccer or football or whatever you
So
guys.
did I as well.
Yeah. And we would do a lot of drills, and I was the goalkeeper, and so like we would do like drills where it would be like the game is like you're diving to the side and you're training your technique, and your goal is to catch all the balls that we're throwing. You're never going to have a situation in a soccer match where you have to dive and then get up. You have to catch a ball, dive, and then get up and catch another ball. That would never happen. If you catch the
Yeah.
ball in the game, it's over. But you're still just training this movement of laterally moving your body, diving from side to side, and stopping the shots. Then we would like add a shooter. We would like, because we would do the goalkeeper training, and we would get someone to come over, one of the strikers, and they would just kick balls at us from different places on the field. And that would be another kind of constraint. It's like we're having like maybe breakaways or specific aspects of the sport. We're training them, and then we would finally go to the game. And the game is so much easier than the training, because like most of the time when you're a goalkeeper, you're just chilling back there, like yelling words of encouragement and hanging out. You're not really doing too much, but the training is like very specific, and it involves a lot of movement.
Yeah.
So that was kind of something that I remember from being a kid playing sports. And then when you go to jujitsu, for a long time, the training was show technique and then roll, and we wouldn't do the like specific work that was necessary to improve our skills. And so I think that that's something that is now, as jiu-jitsu is becoming a more like organized, it's becoming more of a sport
Organized,
than
yeah.
just like a martial art. And so because of that, the training is becoming more professional. Like when we did our ADCC camp, it was like everything was very structured, for ADCC camp. And that was really helpful for all of us getting better.
Yeah, it's like points and stuff as well. Is like the good thing you say is because I have never done anything outside of ecological learning. So my coach, I'll actually plug his name underneath just as well. He's called Martin McLaughlin, and we train out of Team Torres in Derry. And he's a black belt competitor. He actually got a bronze this year at the IBJJF Europeans, and he is like been constantly on about the ecological. And if I could like summarize it in a few words, it's probably just minimizing variables in order to improve sub skills, and that's really like, but like a lot of people jargonize it, and then as a result, I think it's like very ego repulsive, and people don't like the people that are pushing it forward, like Greg Souders and other people. And people like, if someone just layman's terms a lot of it and just said, oh, right, we're just minimizing variables, we're just playing games here, and then we're going to see what happens as a result. Like whatever is churned out is just you improving your sub skills, and eventually that makes up the bulk of jiu-jitsu, and that makes up the bulk of rapid skill acquisition in general. Everything is made up of sub skills, and you're playing games to get better at the sub skills. If you're, for example, passing half guard and you grab a head and you switch your hips or whatever else, is like there's like a few sub skills in every guard or every position. Like in the guard, you're keeping your legs in front, you're keeping your frames, you're causing Kazushi off balance. Is like everything is just made up of sub skills, and like if you just layman's terms that to people and like instead of putting them off, and I feel like it's once again it's a marketing standpoint. People are like put off by this jargon when realistically it's very simple, and that's probably where it's going wrong with like the ecological approach, because basically what you're doing is ecological. It's just the same thing, but like people are just putting different names on things, and it doesn't really matter what the name is. Realistically, all that matters is the skills that you're developing as a result. We play like as you were saying, it's like jiu-jitsu's got very organized. My coach is actually an ex-teacher, so he knows how to put this information across, and a good teacher does that. Like a good black belt can put information across in layman's terms to you as if you're like five, and like they can transfer that information really fast. And I think that's just what good coaching is in general. It's the ability to transfer information at a rapid speed to someone that doesn't understand it, because that's really the essence of teaching in general. Like we're tribal, we're supposed to pass things on. We're not supposed to organize them. We're not supposed to make them inaccessible to people and the everyday people. And that's why, like, I got you on. I wanted you to see like your approach, and you seemed like from outside, and I was like, he obviously does some sort of training that would come across as like ecological in a way. It's just using more brain than just brute. Using more brain than brute. That was probably the best way to explain it.
Well, I think that it's funny because similarly to we were talking just about like how I used to, I kind of made a point that I used to do like so much volume, and then now it's like the volume, and I still there's still a lot of hard work now, but it's very different and more structured. Similarly, like when I first started training, I was like a driller, like full in, like get the reps, do the like set the timer 3 minutes, no talking, kind of like. And there are certain skills in jujitsu that I think that are built better by training them at a minimal resistance, right? But that doesn't mean that they're not ecological. Like ecological doesn't mean live training, right? Like so, the research that I've done is ecological. It stems more from ecological dynamics. So we're understanding how humans learn movement instead of like just like like ecological doesn't mean like only live training. You know, there are still some skills that are built, and we're still playing games when we learn skills through other mechanisms. But
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that it's not like some ways to drill are ecological, if that makes sense. So like for me, I do
Yeah.
this thing called micro drilling, where essentially I take a small aspect of a technique and I train getting to this, like the game or the goal would be to get to this sort of checkpoint. So like that's how I got really good with leg locks, was I would drill them like I would practice essentially getting the feedback of the strong bite, and that's how I kind of learned what a strong bite on a Aoki lock or a reverse Aoki lock or a heel hook was through these like just getting tons of reps in the position and having my partner kind of give me the feedback and kind of move a little bit in the position so that I could learn how to hold a leg lock. Because I used to compete and I would get on legs and I would rip it as hard as I could and nothing would happen. And I was like, I don't understand why the leg's not breaking. So I would drill this like a lot. And I was then I would try to like drill other things too. And I kind of got to a point like nowadays, it's like, I don't do any drilling anymore, really. Like, and similarly, like when I was coming up, I used to love watching Gianni Grippo. And he came to
Yeah.
train with us recently. And Gianni was a guy like 10 years ago who was like, he was like telling people he drilled 5 hours a day, you know, all those Berimbolo sequences, blah, blah, blah. when he came to train with us, he was teaching seminars on constraints led training. So like
Mhm.
he kind of is another instance of the guy who did like a full 180. And I think that we're seeing this a lot as it's, and that doesn't mean that what we did before was useless, but that does mean that now as the sport is becoming more organized, as more educated people are finding their way to jiu-jitsu, we're finding better ways to learn jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, no, you're 100%. And even like, do you find some people like Kieran Kitchuk as well? I'm sure you train with him.
Trained
Do
with
you
him the
find
other
that
day.
see like do you find people like him are very similar? Like I noticed like I watched some of his instructionals and he seemed very, what's the word for it? Just dialed in with how he thinks and how he trains. And it's like everything is down to an absolute art when it comes to like leg locks. And you see him on legs is like he just looks like he's surgically attached to them. It's like they can't get out no matter what. And I remember like a couple of years ago when I was first watching leg lockers, it was like he was the one person that came to mind. I was like, this guy just like looks like he's latched onto a leg. It looks like he's hard to even get off. And then he was just breaking guys like with that. I think he was the inventor of the false read.
Yeah, I don't know if Kieran invented the false streak, but he's definitely the first guy who I saw use it at a high
Yeah.
level. I think the new wave guys were the ones who were like originally using it. Or they were DDS back then, but he was like the first guy who I saw using it at like a high level at ADCC trials. And he's one of those guys. Again, he's very like I think he's similar to me. He used to be like a big time driller, like lots of reps, and so maybe there is something to like just getting the reps in. But now we're seeing guys getting better so much faster. So I think that it's interesting because like the best guys are all training a lot and they're all training very hard. So there has to be something that we can do to kind of separate ourselves. And then like eventually when everybody if everybody makes the kind of transition to like a newer, more advanced approach to training, then there's going to have to be another kind of this is how like the game is going to continually evolve is we're going to constantly find new ways to improve faster in jiu-jitsu. So
Yeah.
like I have an ebook that I wrote like 2 years ago, no, even more, 4 years ago. It's called 15 Ways to Get Better at Jiu-Jitsu Faster.
Mhm.
The book is like all the stuff in it is good, but there's so much that I've learned in between now and then. I could do another one that's just 15 more ways because the the way that we're training nowadays is so different from how I would train years ago, and I'm still getting better.
Mhm. Even one thing I even wanted to add as well too was like what you said is right. I think you do need reps because like if you take a white belt and he comes in and like you try to take a ecological approach with him straight away and he doesn't know how to move his body or anything, it sort of looks wrong and they're like everything they don't even know how to move their body yet. I feel like people need to learn how to move their body first and learn the movements of jiu-jitsu. And then once they have like the base where like all you guys already had a base to come from. So like you can
Yeah,
build on top of that. These constraints led approach are basically you already had the base of the pyramid and all them supplementary accessory now on top you're just building on. Whereas like if someone comes on straight away with ecological, not everyone I feel like unless they were athletic could just pick it up straight away. So I do feel like they need them general basic reps of knowing what's right and what's wrong with jiu-jitsu. That's where I feel like the ecological approach could have, like there could be a hole in it. Like I do agree with it because that's the only thing I've ever known. But I do feel like there's definitely a hole. Like everything, there's holes in everything, but it's like it's up to you to actually be able to find them. But definitely, like I agree with everything you said there.
yeah. I think that it's like I don't think either extreme is good. Extremes in my experience never tend to be right. It's always
Mhm.
like a little bit of one thing and a little bit of another. And it's
Yeah,
funny too because even I don't know if you saw like the Greg Souders and the Big Dan kind of debate, and
yeah,
I don't,
I've seen
and
parts of
they
it as
like
well.
the thing is that's funny is like the Greg and Dan like they probably agree on more than they think, but it's just like they're speaking different languages.
Yeah, they don't. They're actually not. They're going on there like with a closed mind. They're like, we're like, me and you're like, okay, we'll agree with this, we'll disagree with that. Like most of the time, is like you should go into conversations with the idea that you're not trying to agree or disagree. You just need to think about what you're talking about and then be willing to come to a conclusion. And even if you're wrong, this is the probably the same thing with jiu-jitsu itself. It's like the reason people aren't getting better is purely because they can't look under themselves. They go, right, well, what am I doing wrong here? Maybe if my partner's going really hard, maybe I should find a way to shut him down. Maybe if my leg locks aren't working, it's probably my fault. What am I doing wrong here? Instead, a lot of time people are always blaming everyone else. And I feel like the Greg Souders situation with Bogdan is like neither of them were wanted to come to a conclusion. It's like they weren't on the same wavelength at all. And that probably happens with a majority of people is they just wanted to come on and argue instead of just coming on with an open approach. They actually lead to the betterment of jiu-jitsu itself.
Yeah, I think that, well, there's so much like one thing that kind of sucks about jujitsu learning that I didn't really find in other sports is like it's funny because we always talk about how there's like no ego in jujitsu, whatever. There's like an extreme
Under the-
amount. There's so much ego. It's a ridiculous amount of ego in like in training or whatever. Like I feel like the like if you are truly like interested in the art or the sport and you improving at it, you would be more and you would be willing to be wrong in the name of like getting better at something. Like that is true like ego, like less ego jujitsu.
Yeah.
Like you are more interested in the art and the like so for example, like for me, like I train with Nicky Rod, who is like
Mhm.
a hairless gorilla, and he beats the shit out of me like 4 times a week. And so like when I train with him, if I am just like, oh, I got submitted today because it was Nicky Rod and it's because he's really good and really big, I get nothing out of this training if I simply go straight to justifying the results based on, you know, my like him being good and him being bigger than me. So for me, it's like when I'm training with someone like that who's going to beat the shit out of me no matter what, I have to look for small victories, you know?
Yeah, the
I have
small
to,
ones, the small ones.
and that's where like a lot of learning happens. It's like, okay, when I'm getting tons of negative feedback, what little positive feedback am I getting? So like, and then it's kind of like like we train with like so in America when we play baseball, when you swing the bat to warm up, you put a weight on it. So you swing a really heavy bat, and then when you take the donut off the bat, it feels really light. So training with
Mhm.
Nicky Rod is like training on hard mode. So then when I go back to easy mode, it feels even easier, you know?
Yeah,
But if I were to only look at my training with him as like this pointless thing that is just doesn't matter because he's big and he's good and nothing he does would work if he was small, you know? And I focus more on protecting my ego than on like actually learning, I would stop all progress, right? I think that
yeah,
you have to have the ability, especially in training, because training is safe. You have to have the ability to just get your ass beat and be okay with it. You know, it's okay to lose.
yeah,
It's okay to fail. And I think that in writing, I do the same thing. It's like, okay, if I put something out and it gets 7 likes or it gets 5 likes or whatever, it's like, oh, maybe that was not a good post. But maybe that's not like, I could be like, oh, it's the algorithm. Oh, it's the fucking
yeah,
time of day that I posted it was wrong or something. Or I could just be like, oh, okay, on to the next thing. It's all data. And I think that
yeah.
more people need to, especially in jujitsu, because it's like nothing you do in jujitsu really matters. Like if you lose at a jujitsu tournament, nobody cares. Even like
No,
me, like when I lose, I just like it's fine. And I compete at the highest level of the sport right now, and it's fine.
yeah.
The
You don't
you
get
only
too down on your losses, and then don't get too big on your wins. It's like just start the next day. As like I think a lot of people think like a big one's going to completely change their life or something, but reality is you're going to wake up tomorrow and do the same thing that you've always been doing. And I think that's a problem. Is like I told my coach this. I was like, I love training jiu-jitsu so much, That like if it meant like that I could never compete anymore and I could just do jiu-jitsu every single day, it's like if you handed me like a black belt world championship and you said, or you can never train another day in your life, or you can just train that, you can train jiu-jitsu the rest of your life and not have a black belt world championship. I would always take training jiu-jitsu every single day, purely for the reason that I love it so much and that like it's changed my life. It's probably one of the biggest catalysts for my life and my progress and just general. And we probably have the same mentality purely because you wake up and you do the same thing every single day. And like coming from that place, everything else is easy because jiu-jitsu itself is hard, and you have to turn up. You have to look at these minor adjustments, these small ones, and it's probably the best sport for personal growth in general. It's like most guys are talking about reading self-improvement books. Is like just join a jiu-jitsu gym.
Yeah, I think that well, it's funny too, like kind of going off of what you're saying about like winning and losing, like not really affecting you. I feel like it's more of a positive sum game. So it's like a win can be like like a super big catalyst. Like so for me, like I did well at ADCC last year, and this was
Yeah.
like this led to so many opportunities. That was awesome. But like I have lost many times, and the losses never hurt as bad as the wins help. It's always like way, like it's never that bad to lose, and it's really good for your career to win. Um,
Mhm.
but even so, like jujitsu will always kind of find a way to keep you humble. You'll like it's like for me, it's like okay, I can go get top four at ADCC, and then Tuesday I can go back to the gym and train with Nicky Rod and get tapped 5 times, and I suck again. So it's like there's always a way to like kind of it will always kind of build you up and bring you down, and it's the progress is more about learning to ride the waves, the good waves and the bad waves, instead of like you said, like kind of getting so caught up in the like getting so caught up in trying to be the best. Like it's not really about that. And I
No.
think you're right. Jiu-jitsu does teach you this better than most things. For me, it's like the only thing that sucks is it's like hard to do it at a high level for a long time physically. You know?
Yeah. It's probably everyone has like a shelf life really, and like in jiu-jitsu it seems really short. As like even like you see athletes in jiu-jitsu and like they had a peak and all of a sudden they start declining. The probably the only person that I've seen in jiu-jitsu that's peaked for a long period of time is Cabrinha. And like Cabrinha lasted what was it, like did he win a Grand Slam at 38? I think it was.
Mhm.
Like to do that on top of he started off a senior post and he was on about like how he was a baker and stuff as well too in his story. Cabrinha's probably the best example of jiu-jitsu and like even his longevity, how he treated his body. I'm not sure he was on PEDs, but I assume he was based on how good of shape he was and how athletic he was. But like he is an example of just prime jiu-jitsu at its best.
Yeah, I think that when I think of like the true like kind of I think of like Marcelo Garcia for me is who I think of when I think of
Yeah.
like guys who are just like this is what jujitsu is. And now when I think about it, I honestly think of like I think of like Joe, like Joseph Chen, because he's like he's like a young kid who's like his style is very like kind of not super athletic, just very good technique. And when I think back in the older generations of guys who kind of give me the same vibe. It's like Marcelo. I'm trying to think who else was like old school. Eddie Cummings was another guy who was like
Yeah.
just Eddie is not the best example because he was kind of physically broken, but like the success that
Yeah.
he had, the success that he had despite his physical limitations is like extremely like that's like prime jujitsu. Like that's what it's about, like being
Yeah.
able to do the best that you can with what you have.
Yeah, it's like it's good as well too. Is what you notice with some people is their ability to reapply what they know. So like Eddie Cummins was like had a master's degree in physics, so he understood leverage. And then you had Lachlan Giles. He knew he was actually a physiotherapist, I believe, and I'm sure there's no one better that knows how to break knees than someone who fixes them. It's like that
Yeah,
reverse engineering is like a lot of the best people, and you've done it as well in jiu-jitsu in terms of writing and stuff as well, is you've just reversed engineered what you know and you've got applied it to somewhere else and you probably don't realize it, but it's just like your everyday life. I done the exact same thing. It was like when I was like posting content and I was like, oh well, jiu-jitsu was like, oh this is shit, this is shit, this is so bad. and then, oh, this is getting better, this is getting better. So I've been through them ups and downs with jiu-jitsu that had just helped me apply it to other aspects of my life. And then your stuff with clients and stuff, you work with people online, you go, oh, this is shit, this is shit, this is shit. And then now this is working, and you get that feedback. And that's just jiu-jitsu every single day. You're like, this is good, oh, I'm so good. And then oh, I'm so shit. It's literally every single day is the same thing on repeat. It's like an endless cycle.
Mhm. Yeah, I think too, like jujitsu kind of showed me that like the idea of that improvement exists. I think like so for me, a lot of people, and I know like I felt like this when I was younger. It's like you kind of think like, okay, I'm stuck, and you're kind of hopeless. You're like, I'm stuck, and I don't think that it can really get better. And jujitsu through like the training and the whatever training approach you get, like as long as you show up to training, you will slowly improve. And
Yeah.
when you start to see that improvement, it transfers over because you start to apply the same kind, even if it's literally the only thing you take from jujitsu is that if I show up, I get better. If you apply that to writing or working with clients or whatever you're doing, it will slowly start to translate into other areas of your life, and you'll start to see progress elsewhere. So, like for me at 19, I kind of was like, okay, no matter how hard I train, I'm not going to be that good. I'm also not going to make money. I'm also not going to like have a happy relationship or whatever. And then now it's like, okay, I jiu through like a decade of training and then starting to apply that to that kind of mindset of consistency to other areas. I'm like you can kind of have it all, and I think that
Yeah.
jujitsu kind of taught me that.
It does. It gives you probably that the self. It's because you're forced to be self-sufficient. You have to take training under your own hands. Like you're only going to get better on the basis of that. Like when you think about it, it's about like running a business for yourself. Is if you can be self-sufficient, like getting good at your skills of applying yourself to training, going to competitions and stuff, is that self-sufficiency just carries on the other things in your life, and you can just apply it elsewhere. You seem to be in a rush here as well too, and I've taken you probably well over the 30-minute mark. Thank you very much for coming on as well, Chris. Do you want to end with anything?
Um, I think that the last thing that I would like to add is just I think that we're talking one thing that jujitsu teaches me as well is like confidence, and I think that you
Yeah.
build confidence. Like everyone thinks that like the problem with like the self help world is everyone is like, oh, if I read some book or if I listen to some speech, I'm gonna get this confidence. And I think that
Yeah.
true confidence is built through like training and through effort. So like the daily effort of like working on your skills or doing kind of like whatever is necessary to build something new. This is where like true confidence comes from. It's not like you don't get it from reading a like the subtle art of not giving a fuck or a self help book or something like that.
The courage to be disliked.
Yeah, this is not how you get confident. You get confident from like showing up every day and then seeing improvement in real time. And this is like the
Yeah.
best kind of confidence that you can get. So I think that's kind of the last point that I would like to make before we wrap up. Is like
I.
confidence
Oh,
is built through
yeah.
skills, not through magic self help books.
Yeah. 100%. Like I couldn't agree more. Is it's building a body of evidence so dense that no one can deny you. It's like that the Cal Newport book as well too. Um, what was it as well? It's what's that Cal Newport book called? Is so good
So
they can't
good.
deny you.
Yeah, this
Yeah,
is a good one too.
that's it. Is that's it really? Is like how could you not be confident in yourself? Is like when you're building like a physique and stuff, it's a body of evidence. Everything that you do, like your skills, your accolades, even though accolades are good, is they are also an adding to your confidence because you believe who you say you are. Purely from that reason, it's like a lot of time, like hypnotherapists and stuff, they're trying to tell you things. They're like, if you got hypnotized, but you didn't have a body of evidence, they back up that you're not going to actually believe in yourself to do anything. I think people like Gordon Ryan know that they're the best purely because they've got a body of evidence so dense they say they are who they say they are. And like I feel like, as you said, people think that they can just get it by reading a book. It's definitely not. It's what you're doing every single day and building that body of evidence so dense that they're so good that they can't deny you. And you've done that now so far, way even with ADCC, and hopefully now next time around you'll be able to get the gold.
Yeah, that would be sick. But I feel like the kind of I think that it's funny. Like 2 years ago, I had this. It'll be the last thing I'll say. But like 2 years ago, my coach was like, I think you could be like I was ranked number 8 in the flow rankings or whatever, and he was like,
Mhm.
I think that 2 years of training in like a world-class environment, you could definitely be like a top 5 grappler in the world. And now it's like at the 88 kilogram weight class, I am a top 5 grappler in the world. And so I have that kind of like, I have the results that kind of prove that. And I think that it's not the confidence comes through the training with like the other world class guys. So it's like training with guys who are like at the top level gave me the confidence that I too could be at the top level. And then that led to eventually reaching the top level of the sport. But it was not just because someone told me I could do it. It was like, okay, I'm going to do this. I can do this. I have someone who believes in me, and that's cool. But I'm not really like fully confident in it until I am pursuing the thing with other people who are pursuing the thing.
Yeah, that's interesting because I actually heard Craig on a podcast not so long ago with Tom Halpin. It was on Insight podcast, and he had said, well, you obviously need to be the best in your country first, and then you build European, and then you build world level. Is like you're building that body of evidence. It's I read a good thing in a book as well recently. It was like they're stepping stones. Everything is stepping stones to the next thing. Is like so you go to like ADCC, you medal at ADCC, then the next goal is then eventually hitting gold. But like a lot of people set their goals like to these mad things when they haven't even like had the basic goal of like, all right, I'm going to win my first jiu-jitsu comp, then I'm going to win an international open, then I'll win an IGF European, and then I'll go worlds. Is like, and just hit the stepping stones, build the confidence, and then move from there. That's the same with everything. Like, but I appreciate you coming on as well too, and that was great. It was good conversations that we had.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for having me. And then can I just plug some stuff real quick before we finish up?
All right, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, so just check out my newsletter, The Grappler's Diary. It's on Substack. It comes out every Friday and every Monday for paid subscribers. And then also, too, we have a book, A Grappler's Diary, 151 Notes on the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Experience. It's available on Amazon. That's my shameless sales.
I'll plug all the links underneath Chris's links and any other links that I had mentioned on the video as well. Appreciate you coming on, Chris. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Cheers. Appreciate it. Bye.